How's it going, everybody? Good to see you all.
Okay, I'm working now, I think. Jagmeet, thanks very much for coming here today. It's great to see you. And it was funny when we came up to stage, I said, sit wherever you like. And he said, I'll take the seat on the left. So Jagmeet, just picking up on Daniel's comments there, I'd just like to say thank you very much for all the support that you've given us. For years, the NDP have sponsored private members' bill for the labor mobility tax deduction. And then Jagmeet and I have had conversations around attaching those labor conditions to those tax credits. And so the work on apprentices, and I forgot to mention in my comments that one of the key things that we were able to change in those apprenticeship requirements for the clean tax credits was that it's registered apprentices. So that's a critical thing for our industry to make sure those apprentices are registered. And Jagmeet was very supportive of that and the definition of prevailing wage as well. So let's begin by just saying thank you very much, Jagmeet, for your support.
Wow, no, thank you.
So I'm just wondering, we hear a lot about the supply and the confidence in supply agreement, and we recognize this minority parliament. Can you maybe tell us, what really is a confidence and supply agreement that you have with the Liberals, and how's it working?
It's a great question. It's one of the ways that I describe it, I think that works the best, is particularly in a union setting, is that it's a collective agreement, basically. We've got an agreement, and just because we have an agreement doesn't mean we love the bosses. In fact, we've got lots of beef with the bosses. We're fighting with the Liberals all the time. But we have an agreement that lays out 27 things that they need to do. And those 27 things are things that we identified from the people that we represent. They're going to benefit working people. And so some of those included those conditions around if we're going to spend money, public money, on projects in our country, that public money should be tied to benefits for workers. It should be tied to good wages. It should be tied to good union jobs. So a part of what we were able to do was to use the collective agreement that we have, this negotiation that we did. We fought hard. And even though we've got things in writing, I should also point out, we are working with a government that often doesn't really want to follow through on what they promise to do. So we've got to fight them and force them. So on things that we've got written down, we still got to push them and fight to make it happen. So we've got an agreement. It lays out things that need to happen. And then we fight hard. We've got great MPs like Daniel. You heard from him. Someone who understands the struggles of the people that are in building trades, has been a union activist, he's been a worker who understands. So having that type of insight gives us the ability to then fight to make these things happen. So it's going, so far, we've been pushing and fighting and getting results for people.
And of those 27 items, we talked about prevailing wage and those issues that are really important to us. Dental care is on there.
Yeah.
What are a couple other highlight
Sure.
big picture things that are on there, Jay?
Yeah. Just to give you a bit of a sense. So on dental care, we worked it out into different phases. The first phase was for kids under 12, and 500,000 kids, so 500,000 kids qualified. And this started in December of last year. We're now a couple months into that program. Over 230,000 families have applied for that program. So it's been taken up very, very actively. So it shows there's a lot of need. So.
Yes, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
By the end of this year, we've secured it in the budget that seniors, kids 18 and under, and people living with disabilities will also be included. So what that really means in a real practical sense is that a senior will be able to go into their dentist or their hygienist by the end of this year, and their dental care needs, whether they need dentures, whether they need a root canal, pretty costly services will be covered by this agreement. Pharmacare is another piece that we're pushing forward. By the end of this year, we need a legal framework to move forward with pharmacare. That's something we fought for. Daniel mentioned anti-scab legislation. That's something that we've long fought for. It's in the agreement, and it has to be done by the end of this year, and we're going to fight hard to make that happen.
Great. Well, we're really pleased to hear about anti-scab legislation, that's for sure. And dental care and pharmacare, of course, are programs, I think, that are very important to many Canadians. And that'll also help, level up those folks in our communities who aren't able to participate in the middle class to the same extent that many of us are here in the room. So appreciate all your your efforts on that. And then, is there a time limit to the confidence and supply agreement?
Yeah, so the way it works is if all the elements are delivered, what we do in exchange is allow the government to run for the normal 4-year term. So the full term would be 2025.
Okay.
And if at any point in time what they promise to deliver and we fight hard and don't get it, then we've got the right to withdraw our support.
Okay. So, but there's no election imminent, is there?
I don't think so. Really, last time I didn't think so either, to be honest, in 2021. But the government called it, so it could happen anytime. Not to scare you all, but it won't happen because New Democrats are going to force it unless you'll see it coming, unless they break a promise, unless they don't deliver on dental care, unless they renege on the anti-SCAB legislation, unless they don't follow through on something that we force them to commit to. We're on our end. We're going to honor the agreement until it comes a point where they don't honor it.
Well, I think that's good because I think, as Canadians, we like stability in our government. And I think that there's been successive minorities delivered as well because Canadians are saying coast to coast that, we like to see our parties work together. And so that's really encouraging.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm not afraid to say this, there are some people that don't like the idea. I understand that. And for me, cooperation, even if I don't like somebody, let's be clear, I'm a New Democrat, I'm a proud New Democrat, I don't like having to work with another party. I'd rather I was the prime minister, I was calling the shots, and Daniel wasn't just a critic for finance, but he was my finance minister. Wouldn't that be cool to have an IBEW member as a finance minister? Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what we have is what Canadians decided, and I don't think it's a bad thing if I can use the power we have to get things done. I think I got elected to deliver things, to make things happen. And that's what New Democrats have done. You think about Tommy Douglas, in a minority government, delivered Medicare. If you think about old age pension, if you think about CPP, you think about EI, these are things that all happened when New Democrats were in a minority setting, were able to push the government to deliver. So in that same tradition, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get results for people.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for a very candid answer. Our conference theme is building jobs for tomorrow, and we've had conversations about the transition to net zero and just transition. And for a lot of our members, when we get off a plane and we're going to work and we see all these big signs that say, net zero is coming, net zero is coming. And for a lot of them, it's net zero jobs. Like, what does this? What does this really mean? So, when it comes to this transition to net zero, what are the NDP's priorities?
Our top priority when it comes to tackling the challenges in front of us, our number one priority, this is without any hesitation, we are a workers' party. We were founded by workers, founded by labor, founded by farmers. Our number one priority is jobs, period.
Right.
So in any decision that happens, and you heard from Daniel, you heard from the work that we do, in any decision that happens, our number one priority is our workers getting good union jobs, our workers at the table, our workers getting benefits, and you can see in our actions that's what we're delivering. We're making sure that our number one priority is jobs and workers. So with any movement, we look at it like this. There is a lot of changes coming, and change is tough. And we want to make sure if changes are happening, we know that the bosses are always going to find a way to make money. Corporations are always going to find a way to continue to make profits. But what I'm worried about is when these changes come and changes happen globally, global market shift, when changes happen, workers are always the ones that are forgotten and ignored. And I want to make sure that that does not happen, that workers are not forgotten, workers are front and foremost, that any decision that happens has to be one where it shows that there's a benefit for workers. And when I think about any major change we have to make in society, that doesn't happen unless workers are actually creating more jobs. So I look at the next phase as how can we use this as an opportunity to find ways to create more good-paying union jobs. That would be my priority.
So no worker gets left behind.
Perfect way to put it.
Awesome. So, just picking up on that, the government has tabled a sustainable jobs plan, which is a precursor to sustainable jobs legislation which will likely be introduced in the House this fall. So what are your priorities and what do you think of the work that the government has done so far on sustainable jobs, their sustainable jobs plan and the possibility of the legislation? Do you see they're on the right track? Is there more that needs to be in there? Would you recommend any kind of changes?
Yeah, on the sustainable jobs, really it's about sustainability. So we need to give real confidence to workers that there is a future of jobs, not just for today, but for tomorrow. And so part of, for me, what is a good sign is that we were able to force the government to have strings attached. And that to me is a real big change. If you look at the past, there's never been a previous incentive that's been given to a particular sector that has had strings attached clearly that include language around good wages, like the prevailing wages piece, or include language around registered apprenticeships. This is really groundbreaking. And it's important because we would not sit by and allow legislation that didn't have guarantees for workers. And so a couple of things that we want to see is that lots of times, and Daniel mentioned this, consultations happen, and they consult with the CEOs of the companies, they consult with the experts in the field, but they don't consult with the workers, the actual people impacted. And so we've been really, really adamant that any decisions around this type of legislation, the goal should be to protect workers. And if we want to protect workers, they should be at the decision-making table. That means unions, that means leadership of unions, and that means workers themselves. So that's a big part of it. When we look at that legislation, if workers aren't reflected in it, if workers don't see themselves in it, then that's a problem. And that's what we're fighting for.
Right. Well, that's really good to hear. And that really is, as you said, groundbreaking. And as Daniel talked about, seats at the table for the Growth Fund, Canada Growth Fund, which is, I don't know, was it $35 billion that they've allocated, the Canada Growth Fund, to invest in these new technologies and to have union leadership at that table, to have union leadership at the Sustainable Jobs Secretariat. This is really good developments for the unionized industry and for workers right across Canada. So thanks so much for your advocacy on that. I'm just wondering, when we talk about building jobs for tomorrow and all these new energy sources, SMRs and renewables and hydrogen, et cetera, oil and gas still employs a lot of our members. And right now, for example, there are turnarounds happening in Alberta, and we're having a hard time getting some people for those turnarounds. We have a big LNG plant out in British Columbia, and they're looking for more people as well. So this employs a lot of our members, and many of us have a real industrial basis of our membership. So, where's the NDP at on the oil and gas sector and current development and potential future development?
We need oil and gas workers. We need energy workers. That demand's not going away, and we need them. So that's first and foremost. We need them. And when we look at the present day, that demand is still high, so we need those workers. And then we look at the future, and this is where I'm worried. And I mentioned this, oil and gas companies are diversifying already. You see them making decisions to diversify because they're always going to find ways to make profit. What I'm worried about, like I said, is that what does that mean for our workers? And so I want to make sure there's pathways for energy workers, whether it's oil and gas or in any new energy, that there's pathways for those workers to always have good jobs to support themselves and support their families. And I want to ensure that happens because I know that the big bosses at oil companies aren't worried about that. That is not their priority. We've already seen Imperial Oil, for example, make more money than they've ever made in the history of their company, record profits, and they still threaten their workers with pay cuts. So the big bosses aren't actually concerned about workers. We are, and that's really our focus. If we see that there's changes happening, countries are investing in clean tech, we can't be left behind because then our workers suffer. So what we want to do is make sure there's a pathway for workers today and tomorrow. We're going to need energy workers in oil and gas, but we're also going to need energy workers in some of these new sectors, right. And we don't want to fall behind. We don't want our workers to miss out on opportunities. We've seen what the states are doing with the IRA, with the Inflation Reduction Act. They've put massive incentives to create clean energy, and if we don't keep up, then our workers are going to fall behind. So I really look at this as, what do we do to make sure there's clear pathways for workers to continue to have good jobs, and we can't fall behind, and I'm going to make sure that we put workers front and foremost in every decision.
So you're not of the school of thought that, and there's some that are the school of thought that we should leave the oil and the gas in the ground.
So our view is that we need oil and gas. There's no question about it. We need it today, and we're going to need it tomorrow.
All right.
At the same time, we know that there's going to be a change. And change is very challenging. Change is very difficult. And change is particularly difficult for workers because workers always get left behind in change.
Right.
And so what I want to do is when that change is coming, I don't want to be in a situation where our workers have been left behind because we haven't made the right decisions to set them up for success for the future. And that's what we're about, and that's why we're making those decisions around making sure workers are at the table. If we see some of the oil and gas companies start to automate and replace workers with more automation, well, we need to be able to step up and prevent that. We need to step up and make sure that workers are giving opportunities for other jobs.
Okay.
We have to make sure that workers aren't left behind. And so we know that we need oil and gas, there's no question about it. We also know that we need to reduce emissions, and we also know global markets are changing. I don't want to leave workers behind in any of those changes.
Okay. And just one final question, because we're coming near the end of our time, and thanks very much for your time today in this candid conversation. You know, the largest oil producers in Canada have formed an alliance, Pathways Alliance, and they recognize they need to decarbonize the production of oil in northern Alberta, and they're going to, you know, make an investment in carbon sequestration. This will be a fantastic job for our members. It'll be, you know, a really solid pathway towards continuing the work in the oil sands and decarbonizing at the same time. So is the NDP supportive of carbon sequestration?
So we don't have a concern about first of all, we support the industry, oil and gas, finding ways to reduce emissions. That has to happen. So we support that. That's something that we encourage. Our disagreement is with the Liberal approach, which is to give billions of dollars of subsidies to the oil and gas companies to find ways to reduce or remove carbon. We think they should be doing that, especially at a period of time when they're making record profits. And not just, and I want to just emphasize this point, it's not a time when, say if the sector was facing some downturn or some challenging times, there's a case that can be made that support's needed when economic downturns happen. But when there is the highest profits these companies ever made in the history of their existence, I don't think it's a good use of our public resources to give them subsidies to do what's right, which is to remove carbon or to sequester or to find ways to reduce emissions. That's something they should be doing anyways. And I think we should be using our public money to make investments that create better opportunities for jobs, that we are investing directly in workers in real meaningful ways, and we're not giving subsidies to companies that are already profitable. So that's where I would differ with that's my difference with the Liberals.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much, Jagmeet, and thanks to the audience for your attention. Are there any final words you'd like to have for Canada's building trades unions?
I'm just really, really honored to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the time. I appreciate this. I take it very seriously. And I want you to know, if anything you can hear from me and from Daniel, we are proudly a workers' party, and we want to serve workers. We want to make sure workers are respected, workers are protected, and workers have a bright future. And that's the work that we're trying to do, is to make sure that workers are always put first in every decision. The big fight we have is with companies and with governments that don't recognize the importance of the people that actually create the wealth in our country, the people that do the work in our country. That's who we're here to represent, and I hope that's something you take away with the comments that I've said today.
Jagmeet Singh, thank you very much for your leadership and your service to Canada.
Thank you.